Rich here loves musicals.
Yeah, I do. I'm a big fan of musicals.
Oh, cool.
Also rock operas. So, like, how do you feel about shows like Quadrophenia you mentioned, Tommy, American Idiot? How do you feel about those?
Well, I unfortunately haven't seen American Idiot. I would like to see it. I loved Tommy when it came out. It was very important in my life. I love The Who. And, you know, musicals, what's interesting right now, there's three rock musicals on Broadway right now. You call Rock of Ages, Million Dollar Quartet, and Memphis. I've seen Million Dollar Quartet in Memphis. I haven't seen Rock of Ages. And but just straight ahead Broadway material. We're very fortunate in Cleveland, so if people are thinking about coming to Cleveland to visit the museum, you should know that the second largest performing arts center in America, which are 10 theaters downtown Cleveland, are running all the time with plays and shows and concerts. So we're very lucky, and if I don't get to New York to see one of the big plays, I'm very likely to see it very quickly. I mean, you know, I loved Spring Awakening, which is a great, great
I saw
play.
that, yeah.
Great play, and you know, and I think it's important that that art form, it does. You know, you've got Duncan Sheik, who's just wrote the play. It opened this week with Suzanne Vega. Suzanne Vega plays Carson McCullers, the writer, and her and Duncan Sheik wrote the music. So what's great is you're now seeing some of this crossover where you're starting to see some real rock sort of plays. I mean, I don't really think of Rent as being a rock music, but everybody thought it was a rock play. You know, Hair, that sort of thing. So.
Yeah, no, all those shows that you mentioned are really good ones. By the way, I've seen or know the soundtrack to most of them, so you got a good taste in music. Who knew? What makes you love rock and roll so much?
Well, I think because it changed my life. I mean, if you were my age, and I'm 65, and if you're growing up and suddenly this stuff shows up, and I love music so much, I was listening to country music and pop music at the time, and suddenly I became aware of rhythm and blues, and then of course Bill Haley and Elvis, and it was music being made by people almost my age for people my age. And that's why, as I said, some people define rock and roll as people made by youth for the youth. And unfortunately, as you grow older, that's why you have to keep adapting and sort of listening to it. But it, you know, it gave me something that was music was so important to me. It gave me something that was my own. It gave me something that I could dance to. It excited me. I mean, I often, when I lecture on the history of rock and roll, I'll play songs that were being played in the early 50s when Alan Freed coined the phrase rock and roll were what we call double entendre songs. There were things like, "It ain't the meat, it's the motion." "Keep on churning until the butter comes." Or one of my favorite records, "My Baby Just Loves My Big 10-inch Record of the Blues." and these are all race records that were rhythm blues records that were then phrased and coined to be rock and roll records. But if you were listening to the other side of the dial, you were hearing things like "How Much Is That Doggy in the Window" by Patti Page. So if you're a teenager or a young kid and you're hearing these songs, and one is boring as all get out, like "How Much Is That Doggy," and then you hear this forbidden sort of stuff that your imagination is running wild with what it's all about and things you're not supposed to, and you can dance to it. I mean, it just overwhelmed me. Now today you sort of take that for granted, and that's the challenge today. You'll hear certain people say rock is dead. No, it's just there are more bands out there now making better music than ever, but there's no clearinghouse through the label. So it seems like with the demise of the industry per se that a lot of this stuff is going away. But again, if you don't also get very, very limited and define rock in some special sort of little box that it is, if you realize it's hip hop, it's metal, it's trance, it's dance music, it's all this stuff, you know, it goes everywhere. It's anything you want, it's out there. So, and it still amazes me, and it still just floats my boat, like when I go in to see somebody like KT Tunstall and I see that a trombone shorty and I haven't seen him, and I say, wow, where have I been? Or I learn about a band that's been around for maybe 4 or 5 years and I didn't know who they were, you know, that sort of thing. So it's very exciting, and I hope that never changes. I hope I have that kind of feeling the rest of my life.
Being that you're an expert on all of this sorts of music, I wonder who do you think is the most influential guitarist of all time?
Well, I don't think there is one most influential, but you know there are a lot of them, and I see your partner getting ready to sneak in there on the other mic. But you know, you look at the people that have been inducted, and Les Paul. Les, you know, obviously not only was one of the great guitarists, he invented the solid body guitar concept, and he invented overdubbing. And he was the one guitarist that every rock guy with a guitar went to. Jeff Beck worshipped him, and Jeff now has a DVD out where he does a tribute to Les, and I was lucky enough to be at that show that night, and you need to see it because he plays both the Les Paul songbook, plus he plays a lot of rockabilly stuff that you'll never get to hear him play. But I think you can, you know, if you look at the pantheon of people we've inducted and the ones we haven't done, if you look at Dwayne Eddy, who's never had a record that had a vocal on it in the 50s and 60s, incredibly important. Obviously, you look at Clapton, who's been so influential. B.B. King, Buddy Guy, these are all incredibly important artists. My favorite guitarist is a guy who hasn't been inducted, but he was Stevie Ray Vaughan's second biggest influence. And Stevie Ray is my favorite guitarist of the last 30 years.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, but our cameraman Marlon loves Stevie Ray.
I love him.
So
Yep.
You just made him very happy.
Well, I'm gonna make you hip to the tip here, because I'm gonna tell you, besides Albert King, the great blues guitarist, the other guitarist that influenced Stevie Ray is a guy named Lonnie Mack. Lonnie Mack's recorded in Cincinnati, and he recorded both a lot of R&B, did a lot of James Brown records, but he had an album that came out in '63 called The Wham of That Memphis Man. He had 2 hits, instrumental singles, but he sang. He was one of the first great blue-eyed soul white singers doing this stuff, and he and Stevie, and they don't sound alike, but they do sound alike. And Lonnie's mainly known for his guitar playing, but you need to check out Lonnie Mack. Another great guitarist that people have never heard is Travis Wammack. Travis Wammack won a contest when he was 12 years old and got a record deal from Scotty Moore, who owned the label. Scotty Moore is Elvis's guitarist. And obviously Scotty's very influential. He's the guy that most of the Brits, that's the first rock and roll guitarist they heard. When they heard Mystery Train or some of those early Elvis records, you heard Scotty picking there. So, you know, I can't pin it down. What's his name, who's incredibly influential right now from Rage, from Machine.
Oh, I can't think.
Was it Morello?
I think so.
Yeah, yeah, and Bruce uses him on some shows sometimes as a guest guitarist, and you know, it's hard to be influential and new, but there are guys out there making strides and doing stuff and continuing to be better.
Alright, so this one's going to be a bit of a tough question, but if you could choose your top 5 bands. No, I don't want to do that.
The reason I don't is, I mean, obviously there could be some political reasons, but that's not really it. It's the fact that when you look at how broad my interests are, whether it's vocal harmony, which most people call doo-wop, whether you call it rockabilly, whether you call it soul, whether you call it straight-ahead rock, I mean, I can't, you know, the one thing I'll answer once in a while is I'll talk about the Desert Island line is what albums would you take to a desert island? And I often talk about the Lonnie Mack album, which I still love, the Beatles' White Album, What's Going On by Marvin Gaye.
Yeah.
You know, so there's probably half a dozen albums that I sort of always revert to. Do you have a favorite? Do you have a Desert Island album? Have you ever thought of that?
I haven't really thought of an album per se. Well, I guess I would choose Abbey Road, because I love that. Maybe Revolver. It's by the Beatles, for those listening who don't know that.
Well, you can learn anything on this show. Yeah.
And, oh, I think I would take Who's Next. And
okay.
I hadn't really given much thought. What about you, Kelly?
This is difficult, but I'd say my personal favorite album is Led Zeppelin's second album, Led Zeppelin 2. It's my favorite.
Not Hall & Oates' greatest hits.
Well, okay, let me. I love Hall & Oates, but Led Zeppelin I think I just love Hall & Oates because of my father. But Led Zeppelin I would say is my most favorite band.
You know, one of the rules on this desert island is you can't take a greatest hits album.
I know.
That's not
I know. Well, what about H2O? That was a good album.
Yeah, so what?